All right. Welcome back to On Point from Pointers for Academic Excellence. I'm here with Joe Muzingo.
Hey, everybody. Good to be back.
And I'm Kevin Nugent. And this week we're going to be talking about board business, present and future, and discussing a number of things with the district. Among them, the new superintendent hire, the strategic planning committee, which is getting into action soon, as well as many of the other ongoing things throughout our district, things we can be proud of, things we want to talk about.
Things we can't be proud of.
Yeah. We run the full gamut. So last we met, the board had decided among three possible choices recommended by MASB. When I say recommended, I just mean they laid out options for districts about what they could do. And the procedure they chose of the three, and the three were an outside external applicant pool that they would assist with, much like what we did with when we found Dr. Tuttle. Dr. Tuttle went through an extensive panel search among 9 candidates. She was interviewed. They then pared down the candidates to 2 and had another full board interview of those 2 candidates. And then the board voted 7-0, which is pretty customary for how board superintendents are chosen. The next option was internal applicants. They were going to allow a number of internal applicants to apply, and then the board would review and interview them and come down with a list, and that we would see that fully transparent publicly. And then the third option was a board appointment. And in the midst of the meeting, on the agenda was scheduled to choose which of the 3 options. And then from there, we saw what evolved into the selection and naming of Dr. Roy Bishop as the superintendent.
Yeah, so I think my summary is they had 3 options of which process to follow. They decided on basically no process at all and said Roy Bishop is the next superintendent.
That's fair to point out because one had no process, the other 2 had an extensive process. And they'll defend that by saying that looking for external candidates is expensive and time consuming. And they'll say that we had a great internal candidate, and so why go through the process?
I think what's hard to stomach about that is this group came in, the board leadership in the majority, talking about process, making sure you got as many stakeholders as possible engaged. That would be students, parents, teachers, other administration, and hearing from all these voices and hearing what's best for the district and having a competitive process. This is the top position in the entire district. Some would argue the top position on all of Grosse Pointe. And 5 people just decided on their own that Dr. Bishop was going to be the superintendent. So obviously you had a lot of people upset about that. Regardless of what you think about Dr. Bishop, you had a lot of people upset about them sort of skipping a bunch of steps and just saying that's the way it shall be.
I think that it's one thing to be confident in your choice, but it's also another thing to be transparent. So the community shares in that confidence. And I think in an elected role, that there can be a lot of scrutiny and that you can save a lot of scrutiny by just putting the process forward for everyone to see. And I think at the end of the day that we could have arrived at that decision and we could have been just fine with the person that was named. But at the same time, it lends itself to being a process that is going to be scrutinized going forward.
Yeah, I think it was Trustee Cotton said, he likes Dr. Bishop. He thinks that Dr. Bishop can do a good job, and we're all hoping he does, and we're all rooting for him. But unfortunately, there might be a little asterisk next to his name that he did not go through a process that many in the community felt was worthy of a position of this high ranking. Only time will tell, but I hope it doesn't set a bad precedent. So next time, 5 years from now, whenever, you've got a completely new board in, and maybe they've got 4 votes to put in the superintendent that they want. And so they bypass any kind of process or engagement from the community and say, nope, this is the person. And we sort of go down this path where instead of having a proper vetting process, instead of having engagement, the majority, if they have the votes, just puts in who they want as superintendent.
And that seems to be a trend and process for them, is they believe they have a mandate to do whatever they wish. I know we had community panels put together for a number of different committees on the prior board, and a lot of community members participated in that. It was widely criticized by the minority board as being not led by their members, even though several of them were on those committees. And then the first thing they did when they came into office was remove all community members from those committees. So it kind of flies in the face of what we've known to be public and transparent, and kind of goes to the process that they've participated in lately, which is lots of communication behind closed doors, lots of input from the community through email channels from a small number of connected people, and then everyone else in the community shut out and they're going to choose what they want to do.
Yeah, and from that perspective, it's pretty disappointing and depressing. I think you had this group coming in that just relentlessly criticized the previous board for not being transparent, for not including the stakeholders and giving them a voice in big decisions, for not generally engaged in good governance. And you've had a lot of decisions made by the new board that was supposed to be more transparent, that is anything but transparent, and sort of this garnering of power and surrounding themselves with allies. And a lot of that's been a little bit under the table or is not as high profile as the superintendent. So I think the average listener who probably isn't paying attention and isn't watching every meeting may have gotten a general sense that they were going back, that this new board was going back on its word to be transparent and to have an appropriate process. But with the superintendent, everybody could see it. That was wide out in the open. It was at that meeting where you described it, where it was just supposed to be an agenda item. Okay, what's the process we're going to go through to pick the next superintendent? And it just became, okay, it's Dr. Bishop and that's it. And so that's on full display for everybody to decide and see whether they think that was appropriate or not. But there's no hiding. There's no hiding behind this idea that, oh, we're the board of transparency. We're the board that has brought process back. They didn't. They haven't. They've done it just the way they wanted to do it. And it hasn't been in the broad daylight at the board table. A lot of it obviously has been communications off the board table. I'm not saying there were Open Meeting Act violations. I don't have that information. I'm just saying that, boy, it seems like they are on the same page and ready to go with the agenda. And if you're telling me that discussions were not taking place before about Dr. Bishop and Trustee Warden, putting him on the agenda and saying that's who it's going to be, then I guess you have swampland in Florida you'd like to sell, right?
Well, they certainly covered all of the reasons for their statements, didn't they?
Yeah.
5 possible reasons, 5 trustees, each having their own take on it. And that's what we've seen many times. This board doesn't like criticism because they ran on the idea that they were going to quell all the chaos that they had created for months. And then when anybody comes in with a dissenting point of view, they shut it down immediately. You can see that with how they interact with Trustee Cotton and how they interact with Trustee Jupe and the call to question. And a number of other things in the community. We'll talk later about how PFAE has been targeted by this board with their new policies. But in general, they want it to have the appearance that everything is hunky-dory here at Grosse Pointe Public Schools, and whatever they say is tried and true. And we should just sit back and let them steer the course. And it really boils down to what President Derringer said, implied that a months-long search for the superintendent would draw a lot of criticism and scrutiny, and they didn't want to deal with that. They had their decision, and they wanted to move forward with it, and didn't want to present other options.
Yeah, and I think my last thought on that is that's fine from the sense that we can have an honest debate about whether that was appropriate or not. I don't think it was appropriate. I think for a position that high up and that meaningful, you have to have a process. You have to be able to have engagement and ask the candidate questions no matter who it is. And I would have loved to have seen that. There was a speaker at the meeting that said Dr. Bishop would have done great. He would have stood on his 2 feet. And there was no reason you had to sort of protect him from this. And I agree with that. I think it's kind of insulting to him, actually, to say, no, it's just him. And Trustee Hull has the audacity to say, well, we don't want him to have to jump through hoops. You don't want the most important position in the district to have to jump through any hoops, like what, answer questions and have interviews? I mean, the fix is in was another one from Trustee St. John. There were a lot of pretty astounding remarks you heard up on that stage in the last 2 meetings. President Derringer having to defend that and say, oh, no, this is actually process. 7 people came in with their own opinion, blah, blah, blah. I mean, that was almost painful to watch for him to have to describe that as an appropriate process. So my point is, it's one thing to just do it. And again, we can argue about whether that's good or wrong. But what makes it especially troubling with this group is they're trying to do that and make it sound like they're the group of good governance and they're the group of process and they're the group that brings in all the voices. You can't have it both ways. If you want to be strong and make those decisions and to heck with everybody else, it's our duty. And as Trustee Warden says, it's legal. Then just do it and don't try to fabricate it as some kind of great process. Just do it, Have the courage to just do it that way and not put up this facade that you went through this meaningful process.
Yeah, and I'm nodding my head a lot over here when you're talking about that. And it's it is interesting that they would pull some leadership examples from Dr. Tuttle as a justification for what they did and not putting in any of the other context involved. Like we had gaps in our central administration that absolutely needed to be filled. So we had internal candidates to fill them quickly when Dr. Tuttle was resigning effective August 31st. So there was no time constraint involved, but they're going to use that as example. And it's funny that they pull it from Dr. Tuttle when both Worden and Hall Hall did too a little bit, but mostly St. John and Worden evaluated her so poorly in so many areas. And then they're going to pull that out as the divine leadership of Dr. Tuttle taught us that we could fill these roles internally.
Wasn't that a nice touch? Oh, but Dr. Tuttle, who we've undermined and can't stand and can barely seem to be on the same stage with, all of a sudden, we're going to model her great choices. Yeah, that was, like I said, there were so many good lines up there. We could go on and on. Each one of them, I think, had at least one very eye-rolling comment. And, well, I think it's worth noting, too, the contrasting the situation with Dr. Bishop in other positions that have become available in the district. So just to give you an example, I was talking with a friend who was telling me what they went through, not they personally, but what this district went through to hire a music teacher. And it was, I'm paraphrasing here, but like 3 interviews, a writing sample, a question and answer that involved parents and teacher and student feedback. I mean, this whole laundry list of what you talk about hoops to jump through, Dr. Hull or Trustee Hull. Here's a bunch of hoops that people had to jump through just for a teaching position, a music teaching position. And they looked externally, they looked internally. They had a lot of great internal candidates. Guess what? They had people from 4 or 5 different states that applied, and they actually ended up going with an external candidate. So you contrast that process, and that's a major process. 3 interviews, writing sample, music sample, input from a lot of the stakeholders. Contrast that to the biggest, most important position in the entire district, and you had 5 people saying, "Nope, this is the person, end of story, we're out of here." That's pretty remarkable.
It is a selective process buffet. You just pick out when the process is required, when it's not, and it's different every time depending on what needs they want to meet.
Consistency be damned.
Yes. So what we saw with this meeting, and kind of brings us to our next segment, was the new policy that the board is creating. And just for a little history on the PFAE's engagement with this majority board, we have to go back to last year when the school district agreed to allow our Google form on the school district website. And in that Google form, we asked for students to provide their information, which under FERPA law is perfectly legal. Kids can do that if they wish. There's nothing preventing them from doing that. The district was not taking school district information and forwarding it to our group. And so the board came up with this concern around FERPA for the kids, which was manufactured in many ways. And they had a policy committee meeting, and then they made a new policy for communicating through district channels, saying that our organization is political and that we shouldn't be allowed. There was a lot of clamor in the community from the usual names that we know in the network, and the awards happened. And Dr. Tuttle was there. The president of the union was there. We had great representation from all the teachers, a wonderful luncheon and afternoon with awards. We spoke about every teacher. We had a photographer there taking pictures. Everybody had great memories they walked out of there with, because it was students and teachers sitting down together. And the accusation, of course, when they filled out the Google form is what we're going to do with the kids' information. Well, here's what we did. We invited the kids to lunch with their teacher, and they sat with their teacher at a table for the afternoon and enjoyed their company. And that was the bottom line for the nefarious activity that took place. And then come now, a few months ago in November, the district reached out to us. The district had a swim grant that they wanted approved that neither the GPFPE or STEAM had approved. And so they came to us. And they came to us because we had actually originated that idea with Dr. Bishop and with Rebecca Fannin, and had discussed with them our need and desire to help out Harperwood students who were not getting access to the Parcells pool. So they came to us with a district idea from Colleen Beeland, and she did all the work, all the research on it, and all we did was approve the grant. It was around $8,000. From then, it was like a roller coaster. The district put it out on district sources. We trumpeted it on our page. We get to help out Harper Woods kids. This is a need in the district. It was district initiated. And then 4 days later, I got a call. It said, we are no longer accepting the grant approval for this until we can sort through everything. And what the sorting through involved was they asked the district attorney if he would find anything wrong with the language currently, and also if there's any policies that exist out there that would prevent PFAE from presenting any approval for a grant if there was any problem with the district accepting that. The district attorney said, no, there's no issue unless they said we're going to build a softball diamond and not a baseball diamond, or we're going to create something that requires maintenance and costs. But in general, a non-political grant can be accepted by school districts for furthering a non-political event, which was helping out swim kids. So when that came to the policy meeting, President Worden said, there's all kinds of questions about this grant. And as far as we knew, there'd only been one question from somebody in the community who's in the network. And that network said that this is a really bad idea. And then they quashed it and put it in the policy. And then even after, the district attorney said, oh, it's okay. He said, oh, can you go back and rewrite a policy that would allow us to do that? So there's a difference between asking if something's legal and then getting a legal language to put forth a new policy to prevent us from being involved.
Yeah, just a couple thoughts. First of all, no question they're targeting PFAE. They don't like us. They don't like our messaging. They don't like that we can be critical of them. They don't like that we hold them to account when we see something that we think is not in the best interest of the district and the best interest of the kids. They don't like us doing that. Like you said, they don't like to be criticized. And so they're trying to mute the good things that we're trying to do in the community. And there's no question about that. They try to make it neutral, but of course, this was all, at the very least, the genesis of this was PFAE. If we don't exist, this policy doesn't exist. There's no question about that.
No, and they were very clear to say, well, if another group in the area who's a political advocate, they decided to donate money, which they never have,
Right.
and have not committed to student programming in any way. If they decided to do that, then they would be excluded too. Kind of foolish, right? We're the only group out there that's promoting these programs. We're the only group out there that's supporting kids and students in the community financially and giving gifts. And so it's kind of foolish for them to say, we're really blocking two, but only one has actually been doing anything for the last year and a half, 2 years.
Well, it's a shame, obviously, because now this money can't flow to the kids. I mean, that's the bottom line. It's not going to get there to help Harper Woods kids learn how to swim. It's not going to get there for kids to be able to recognize their teachers and give them an award, and all of these very good things for the community aren't going to be allowed to happen because they don't like PFAE's advocacy to hold each trustee to a high standard. And again, that's a shame. I think, too, it just reeks of hypocrisy. So going back to the Dr. Bishop appointment for a second, you had Trustee Warden up there saying it's perfectly legal. It's perfectly legal to do this. MASB said we have the legal power to do this. And then you have President Derringer on the PFAE thing saying, well, sure, it's legal, but it's not best practices. Just because it's legal doesn't mean we should do it. Well, yeah, why don't you apply that standard consistently? So just another very big example of the idea that this board came in and they were going to do things very consistently, very upfront. Now they just get to where they want to be one way or another.
And it's an interesting line to draw, right? And what's it say about how they feel about the voters in our community, too? That voters in the community couldn't separate the fact that we were honoring teachers with they're going to go out and vote. So you're saying that awarding teachers equates to us losing votes and losing power. It's absurd. And then the idea that an $8,000 grant to fund a bunch of Harper Woods kids who want to get in a pool and learn how to swim safely, that's somehow going to alter the election process, and that's a political maneuvering.
Yeah, it's silly. There's no strings attached to that money. There's no messaging around that money. There's no politicizing the event. It's like that great Gretchen Walsh event where it was just about the kids and seeing an Olympic swimmer, and there's absolutely nothing to do with politics. PFAE has never done that for any of its events. It has no plans to ever do that. It would be frankly distasteful to do that. It's just, hey, here's the money. Buy the instruments that you need. Here's the money. Teach the kids how to swim. It absolutely comes with no strings. It has nothing to do with politics. And so to your point, the fact that they think that can't be separated out is pretty laughable.
And I didn't think so at first, but A lot of this lends itself to the idea that they're just creating a cloud around PFAE for their own political purposes and nothing more. When Trustee Geringer says it's legal, but it's improper, when he says, "Oh, I didn't know what happened to those band instruments and where that donation went and whose pocket it went into," which is kind of a rough implication. When Trustee St. John is online saying, "We pulled the grant because they had questions about transportation and otherwise," which there's no evidence on earth that supports her statement. I gave her a few times to clarify that statement. She wouldn't because it's wrong. That policy will go to vote, and I don't doubt that it will pass. And so then effectively, some of the programs that we were doing with the school system to award teachers and to honor kids and to fund programming will end because the board has determined that.
Yeah, it's unfortunate and it's sad, but it's obvious where we stand, right? We want to continue to support the arts, the athletics. We want to continue to fill gaps where the district needs us to fill gaps. But we are just a handful of people. And if the district and the board doesn't want us to do that, then we can say, gee, we think that is a bad choice. But it's up to these groups to voice their opinion and say, we think it's crazy that you're doing this. We have dealt with PFAE. They've been great. They've give us their money. It's never come with any strings attached. So, if people care enough, if they want things like instruments and they want us to support plays and choir and sports events, then they need to speak up.
All right. Strategic planning, that's next week too. They're starting that discussion at the board meeting. So the strategic planning committee process started a few weeks ago with a 55-member community panel that involved administration, some teachers, people in the district, and I was lucky enough to be a part of that committee, and I appreciate the work that the district put in to hearing our feedback. And what came out of that committee meeting was interesting. So we had a large group of people that were interested in reopening Trombley and making that an elementary school. Not quite sure about the process for making that happen, but definitely was something that people were very interested in. And then you had the opposite viewpoint, and that was not just not reopening Trombley, but the consideration of consolidating schools in our district. And whenever you hear the term consolidation around our district, given the history, it's something that everybody should take notice of. Specifically, in 2019, the district decided to close two buildings, Popard and Trombley. Both were elementary schools, both on the far edges of the district. It's been 7 years since that happened, and there's still hard feelings about it on both ends of the community, and rightfully so.
Yeah, I mean, I was just talking to a soccer dad who lives in the park, and he said to me, the best part of my day is walking my kids to school. He lives at, down in the park, and he walks his kids to to Defer and Pierce. And I said to him, yeah, it's funny you say that because I'm part of this group of PFAE. And one of the things we really value is the walkable neighborhoods and having a school tucked into your neighborhood where your kids can walk. You can walk your kids. They can ride their bikes. And then that led into this whole conversation about Trombley. It's one of the things that makes Grosse Pointe very attractive, that for a lot of the kids, they've got schools embedded in their communities. They don't have to cross Telegraph Road or 16-mile road. And it's a real selling point. I just think some of the trustees and their supporters don't understand that. And so if they start talking about closing more schools, there's going to be a huge negative reaction.
Yeah, and it's a shame that the word walkability has become a touch point, because we know now that Popard can't be revived because the district sold that area and it's been developed and will not be returning to being an elementary school. But we still have a district school, an elementary school in Trombley that could be reopened.
Yeah, and I think it's important, Kevin, for our listeners to know that you should be paying close attention. There is a chance that this current group of leadership, which I said many months ago when this current board first took over in January of 2025, I got up to the podium at the meeting and I said, the community is concerned that you are going to try to close schools. And I've got this sort of reaction of like, what? Who's saying that? What? I mean, my two big concerns were they were going to run Dr. Tuttle out of town. Check box. They did that. Yep. And now my single most troublesome concern is that they're going to try to close schools. And so everybody out there who has kids in these schools, and even if you don't, just know that that is coming. I can guarantee you that's coming in one shape or form. And if people sit at home and they don't pay attention and they don't get involved, they're not going to be able to stop them. And they're going to close schools.
And we were made aware of Trustee Worden, who had placed a high priority on consolidating schools when she was at that meeting. So we know that that exists on the board majority, and we've also heard that language from many others. And let's talk about why that didn't go well and why that's going to be a really bad outcome if we decide to do that again. Number one, students aren't products on a shelf. You can't take all of the products off the shelf at a store that's not full and then move them to other stores in the area, just like you couldn't take kids from Popard and Trombley and move them to other buildings like they had set out. They said, here's our enrollment, here's what it'll be afterwards, and each building, what that will look like. What they didn't account for was the consumer preference of what school they would go to after they were told that they were going to have their schools closed in their own backyards. And so what we saw in Grosse Pointe was over a 9.8% drop in enrollment from configuration and COVID. And people will cite COVID as being a major reason why we lost enrollment, but other districts didn't experience nearly the loss that we did. Most districts were in the 2.5% to 3% range, so we tripled them. Only Birmingham experienced a 6% change in enrollment, a decline. So our district truly was an outlier, and reconfiguration would be the source of that. And so do we want a district that's so dependent on enrollment, considering consolidating schools? I know which ones they'll consider consolidating. Most people do, right in the heart of our district. And what will be the choice that those people make, given the opportunities close by in private and parochial schools? And in a district that depends so much on enrollment, I think that would be a really costly mistake. You can talk about a building savings and things like that, but we never realized that with Trombley. We never realized it with Popard. Our busing costs are 3 times what they were 2 years ago. And so what we would be looking at would be further loss of enrollment, and we have a lot of evidence about that.
Yeah, those are 2 great points. We did not save money from closing those 2 schools, and the district lost enrollment. So it lost and it lost. So when you hear about closing schools, when you hear about the savings, when you hear about enrollment, know that we now have experience, not in Birmingham, not in Southfield, not anywhere else, right here in Grosse Pointe. 2 schools were closed, no money was saved, and enrollment was lost. And then you add on the intangibles, right, Kevin? So you've lost the walkable neighborhood. Now kids have to be bused. Now they have to get in cars. Now the parents have to take the extra time to get them there. Now you've got more exhaust. You've got more crowding. You've got more infrastructure problems because now these kids need to be taken a further distance. So it's not just the loss of enrollment and the no savings, which obviously are critically important. It's also the loss of your character. It's the loss of the community that makes you who you are and makes you unique and attractive to people that have children, who people might choose somewhere else if we lose that character.
Absolutely. So I know the thought in business is to contract when you're losing money. We're in a good position right now. Our fund equity is up almost $10 million, what it was 15 years ago. We're in a much better financial position. So is closing schools the answer? No, likely not. Likely it's scaling up. And I think the message that needs to be sent to the board right now is let's get back to the educational system that we knew and understood, and also back to the system that we know works. So, whenever we say back to something, people bristle because it sounds like we're going back to tradition, and sometimes that gets labeled as a bad word. But let's talk about what systems demand and require. The problem we have with enrollment could be solved by bringing pre-K into every neighborhood building. So if you have a situation where we could go pre-K to 5, have 7 years in the same building for every family, that's something that's attractive. You're in the system, you're in the building, you're in a stable environment, transitions are minimal. You don't have to send your kid off to middle school. I've spoken with a number of people on this, and they'll tell you that the buildings are too small right now to where they're at. And if you add 5th grade and pre-K, that it's going to be overcrowding. But if you open up Trombley and you redraw some of the district lines and you make allowances for people that are still in their building to stay in their building and work through all of those challenges, you could open up every elementary school and run them between 70 and 80% of utilization rate and have those elementary schools really functioning. And that'll accomplish many things. One, the distribution of our resources right now is inequitable across the district. We have some buildings that are under enrollment, some buildings that are at maximum enrollment. The different pressures, the imbalance of those buildings creates pressures on the administration. It creates pressures on the teachers. It creates inequity among the teaching staff because some buildings have much lighter classes and some are much heavier. Splits could be eliminated, and that's always been a problem. So, this isn't just about bringing some idea back. It's about what makes sense for the district in terms of staffing, in terms of equity, balance, enrollment. And I think what we've seen with some of our latest figures is that we used to have a 2.6% school of choice within our district, and now it's up to 8.8%.
Mm.
So there's 6.2% of our population. And when you're talking about 6% out of 6,400, that's almost 400 kids. And so that would make a big impact if we could get even half of those kids back when they've already said that 175 additional students would allow you to reopen Trombley. But the obstacle is that President Worden tried to make a resolution when we passed the window RFP to make it so that Trombley could never become an elementary school. So, she's holding on to that pretty tightly.
So I've got to ask, does Trustee Warden have any support in the Trombley catchment area? I know that's a question you can't answer, but I'm trying to be very objective here. All I hear is people like Trustee Jupe, Trustee Cotton, private citizens like Matt Kale fighting for Trombley. I never hear that from Trustee Warden. I never hear that from Trustee St. John. I've never heard that in any of these Trombley discussions. So if I'm sitting there on Westchester or, down on living off Essex or Fairfax, I'm saying to myself, well, gee, every time I turn on the board meeting, I know who's championing me and I know who's against me. If you live down in that area and you care about opening Trombley and being able to send your kids there, how in the world could you support Trustees Warden and St. John? I don't understand that.
It's hard to imagine with all that you've heard out of that, especially from Trustee Worden with Dr. Tuttle, where she accused Dr. Tuttle of lying about what she had said at that meeting, that they were going to keep Trombley closed and not put the bond money towards it right away. They've tried to declare that it can't be an elementary school. She's even gone online to say that Matt Kale, who has been presenting at the city councils to try to gather interest, or at least to present the options for Trombley. And she's openly said that that is not a representative of the district. And, in no way should this be given any credit. So what is Trustee Warden's hang up with Trombley? Where does that exist?
I don't know. I've got some theories, but I realize that there's more than just one issue.
If you want to share your theory, just email us at info@pf-ae.org.
I think that one of the things is she's afraid it would look inequitable, right? We reopened Trombley. We went to bat for Trombley. We got that back to a walkable neighborhood for the elementary school, and we didn't do that for Papard. And she's the type of person, she says it a lot. It's not a good look. She's all about perception. And if it could be viewed that Trustee Warden was part of a process that reopened a school deep in Grosse Pointe, but she wasn't capable or didn't do anything to reopen a school in Harper Woods, that's the kind of thing that keeps her up at night. If you can do something great in the district, you do it. You don't get obsessed over whether or not it was completely equitable to everybody else in the district. I mean, if the roles were reversed, I'd be fighting to open Papard. I want the schools open. I want as many kids walking to good schools as they can get. Papard, that ship has sailed. Trombley, we still have an opportunity. That's all.
Absolutely. It's what's there now. And some of the options they've suggested just don't ring very true. The educational hub, which no one can even describe what an educational hub might be. They've thrown out CTE, but no one's ever furthered that effort to say what would it cost to do that. They've also said we're going to make it an early childhood center, but we're not going to use the second floor of the building. And then how convenient is an early childhood center at the farthest southern end of the district for anybody when if you live in the woods, you can drive 10, 15 minutes to early childhood every day. It just doesn't seem...
Well, I think that's right. I think she's just trying to placate them, but there's nothing concrete there. And meanwhile, the months just keep rolling off the calendar, right?
Yeah. Aging building,
Mhm.
No improvements, sitting as a shell in a neighborhood where kids are playing around it on a daily basis, but they
Yeah,
can't go to
but they
school
can't
there.
go to school there,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, and to your point, just real quick about fifth grade, I wholeheartedly agree. And as I said before, when you get out into the community and you talk to people, they say, "Gosh, we really wish fifth grade was back at the elementary school." So yeah, that's a lot of great information, Kevin. But my question to you is, where is the union on this? Do we know? How do the teachers feel? That's what I really want to know.
I can't speak directly for the teachers. I do know that imbalance and inequity across the building with staffing and meeting the needs of the kids is a huge priority for all of the teachers. And I don't think that they can do the best job that they can do given the current staffing levels, more importantly, the distribution of teachers and kids across the district. So I think that they understand and know that there's room for improvement there.
Okay. All right. Good. Yeah, because obviously we want to hear from them, and if you've got a lot of families or a big majority of the families saying let's make this change, and then you've got the teachers behind it too. I mean, that's pretty hard to ignore. And are we going to get some union representation on the podcast because we're
Yes.
talking about that, right?
Yeah, we're going to try to make that timing work. We'd love to talk with them more and hear what they have to say. And going back just to your point before, but the one thing you recognize with teachers in Grosse Pointe is their commitment and their resiliency. They're going to teach whatever classroom they have in whatever building it's in, no matter the circumstances. They do that on a day to day basis. They're at kids' events, they go to their plays, they go to their ball games. They are out and around. So nothing will change from a Grosse Pointe teacher's perspective in terms of that. But what would be preferred? What's optimal? How do we retain these teachers in a competitive teaching environment where steps are no longer inhibiting people from transitioning from district to district? That's the quality of life that you want to present to teachers when you're talking about their teaching environment. What's the best support system that you can have for them? What's the best student allowances that allow them to be successful and not stress them out? So, part of that reconfiguration that I was discussing earlier, pre K to 5, would meet a lot of the needs that I've heard from teachers directly about the problems that they deal with on a daily basis.
Good.
If we want to get into the accounting of it, I know people will say if we bring fifth grade out of the middle schools, won't that leave our middle schools light with students? Yes, of course it would. But middle schools could become at this, well, let's just say this at this age, middle school is a really challenging environment for kids. The differences in their maturity, their intellectual level, their reading levels, how they socialize with one another. I'd really love to make those communities smaller. A 6 through 8 would be a smaller community. We'd have smaller numbers, which would allow us to have more hands on culture building in those buildings and really get us into some innovation. We could have STEM programs, robotics. We could have flex spaces for parents. We could have a counseling center area that would not only just allow kids to plan their schedules out, but would provide a safe space for them to meet and create an environment around the building that's more conducive to the mental health of our kids. A lot of conversations are given towards mental health and where are kids most stressed out. I think it's when they leave elementary school and they're negotiating this environment at the middle school and all of those challenges. Let's make a nice, safe space for them, an innovative space that offers something that most school districts can't offer. And that would be really high tech programs with a really closely monitored situation with teaching teams and all the like that would really make those buildings thrive.
I mean, that seems like the step towards the future, right? I mean, things are changing dramatically with everything that we know what's going on, and we got to get ahead of that, right? We have to be innovative, and if we can do that and preserve the schools, then obviously it'd be a win-win.
Oh, the ice is melting. It's 60 degrees today. We're enjoying the weather outside, but we also want to highlight some of the things that have happened in the winter now that we're moving on to the spring sports season. Both the North girls hockey team and the South girls hockey team made it to the state finals. Neither was victorious, but what an amazing achievement. Also, at the Olympics, we had Zach Wierenski, who is a gold medal champion, and all of us saw that up early morning Sunday. Couldn't have a better breakfast than watching the USA Olympic hockey team and seeing Zach and his other Michigan line mates score the game-winning goal was phenomenal.
So Detroit is hockey town, right? We might be hockey suburb.
Hockey suburb. I
Yeah.
like it. Yeah.
Yeah, that was fantastic. I think that's so great. And the long line of hockey success and tradition that we've had in this community kind of culminated, it feels like. And congratulations to both the girls' hockey teams.
And still on the ice with all of her teeth still, Emilia Zingis finished fifth in ice dancing.
Right.
Outstanding achievement. That's a really competitive field. If anybody follows ice dancing, it is filled with drama and heightened tension between teams. There's even Netflix shows about the ice couples and dancing. But Emilia survived all of that and did an amazing job.
Yeah, it's great PR for the community. It's great source of pride for the community. So we congratulate all of them.
So, coming up this week on March 23rd is the next board meeting. The strategic planning conversation will continue. The policy meeting will finalize their vote on the policy revisions to exclude donations from groups that have acted politically, of which PFA were the only ones. And also, if anybody wants to participate and watch this open and transparent governance at our own school board meetings, I encourage you to come up and show out. And if you are so willing, express your concerns or favor, however that goes. But participation in civic engagement is really important. And we'd encourage everybody to get more involved. If you would like to find out any more information about Pointers for Academic Excellence, you can reach out to us at info@pf-ae.org.
Get involved. Don't let your community change and go in different directions without your input and knowledge. We need everybody's support, and you may not always agree with us, and that's fine, but we want engaged, informed people.
Thank you, Joe, for participating today.
Always great to be here, Kevin. You did a great job.